Okay, let's unpack this. We spent plenty of time discussing, the classic problem of the pedestrian glued to their phone, distracted walking,
Oh yeah, a familiar topic.
for sure. But today, our focus is on something that moves far past simple distraction. We're getting into the realm of the truly unpredictable.
Right.
We're talking about calculated, purposeful, or just profoundly erratic pedestrian actions that completely shatter expected road safety norms.
It's an unsettling topic for sure, because for this deep dive, we are looking at bizarre pedestrian behavior.
Exactly.
And this is behavior that's often rooted in some kind of severe underlying crisis. It could be medical, psychological, or situational, and it just creates a highly volatile environment.
And it's not just about increased accident risk, is it?
No, not at all. It generates this immense stress and anxiety for drivers who are then forced to make these split-second, non-standard decisions, often with, zero context for the behavior they're seeing.
And that context is our mission today. We've synthesized sources tailored for everyone, from professional drivers and community planners to first responders. We want to give you the shortcut to understanding what this behavior actually is, the surprising mix of factors that cause it, and, most importantly, how you can navigate these high-stakes encounters safely.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with definitions. What makes an action bizarre rather than just, careless?
Well, it's not simply jaywalking. The key is the lack of any observable logic. Our sources define this as actions that are highly unusual, completely unpredictable, or just dramatically out of the ordinary.
So they defy common sense or the rules of traffic entirely.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here is that this bizarre behavior, it often falls into two broad categories that drivers have to distinguish between.
Oh, interesting. What are they?
You've got disoriented wandering on one hand and then calculated obstruction on the other.
Tell me more about that distinction.
So, disoriented wandering is that erratic movement. Think aimlessness, stumbling, or stopping suddenly mid-stride without any regard for traffic flow.
Right.
But calculated obstruction, that's a whole different thing. That's the intentional and sustained violation of traffic space. So, someone standing still in the center of a lane, or even physically trying to stop a car.
That makes the danger immediately apparent because the driver's reaction has to change completely based on that intent.
Precisely. And the single most cited example of unpredictable movement, the one that breaks all traditional driver prediction models, is backtracking.
Backtracking.
Yes, this is where a pedestrian crosses a street, maybe gets halfway across, or even reaches the other side, and then suddenly turns around and walks or runs back the way they came.
Oh, wow.
Or they might just walk back and forth across the same stretch of road repeatedly. It completely negates the driver's assumption that the person is moving towards a safe zone.
And beyond just the erratic movements, there's that dangerous disregard for structure, like someone trying to cross a multi-lane high-speed highway where there isn't even a crossing point.
Or physically using their body to obstruct active traffic lanes. That shifts the whole dynamic from an accident waiting to happen to a deliberate intervention.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture of road safety, what's the core danger?
It's the complete absence of a predictive movement model. Drivers rely on milliseconds of prediction. If a person is at the curb, they're probably going to walk across, not stop and spin around.
And when that model is broken?
It's broken. Collision avoidance becomes nearly impossible without sudden, violent braking or swerving, which of course endangers other road users.
And we can't overlook the consequences for the person exhibiting the bizarre behavior. They're often profoundly vulnerable.
Absolutely. Their actions suggest a real lack of protective awareness. They might be ignoring simple safety measures like failing to wear reflective gear at night or not seeing traffic signals.
Right.
And that high-risk exposure, combined with the often high speed of a collision because the driver had no time to react, means the injury severity is frequently catastrophic.
And then the aftermath. These incidents lead to some really complex legal and liability issues.
Oh, determining fault is a nightmare. In a typical accident, liability might hinge on who violated a right-of-way law.
Simple enough.
But when you introduce truly unusual, unpredictable, or intentional obstruction, the legal analysis has to consider contributory negligence, the driver's duty of care, and whether the pedestrian was legally capable of understanding the risk of their action.
Which ties right back to the medical and psychological roots we're about to get into.
Exactly. And that ambiguity just guarantees these long, protracted disputes and major complications for insurance claims.
This is where it gets really interesting because the cause is rarely simple negligence, is it? It's a complex interplay of medical, psychological, and environmental factors.
That's the critical insight from the source material. It really shines a light on how vulnerable certain populations are on our streets. We have to start with medical and psychological conditions.
Okay.
The most common category here involves cognitive impairment. So we're talking about disorientation stemming from conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's.
Where the individual might suddenly not recognize their environment.
Right. They might mistake a busy road for a safe path they remember from 50 years ago.
And it extends to brain trauma too, right? Traumatic brain injury or a TBI. How does an old head injury translate into bizarre behavior on the street today?
TBI is a huge factor. It often impairs what we call executive function, the part of the brain responsible for planning, working memory, and impulse control.
So the impulse control is just gone.
In a way, yes. A TBI survivor might know that crossing traffic is dangerous, but that pathway between recognizing the danger and inhibiting the impulsive movement to dart across the street is, well, severed or damaged.
Which results in these unpredictable, unsafe dashes.
Exactly. And then you layer on psychiatric disorders. Consider schizophrenia. Delusions or auditory hallucinations can drastically impact a person's perception of reality.
Oh, so?
They might perceive a vehicle as a threat they need to avoid by jumping in an unpredictable direction. Or, conversely, they might believe they're invisible or invulnerable, causing them to step out in front of traffic without a single concern.
And what about mood disorders, like bipolar?
In a manic episode related to bipolar disorder, the individual experiences intensely heightened energy and severely impaired judgment. This can manifest as reckless, impulsive actions.
Like daring themselves or just ignoring safety signals.
Precisely because they feel invincible. Or they're simply moving too fast to process their environment safely. Even profound depression can play a role, not necessarily through hallucinations, but through psychomotor retardation or self-neglect, where the lack of awareness just leads to this passive vulnerability on the road.
The sheer diversity of causes is staggering. And it's not just adult mental illnesses. There are developmental and neurological factors at play, too.
Absolutely. The sources specifically highlight conditions like autism spectrum disorder, ASD.
Right.
For individuals with high sensory sensitivity, the sheer volume of noise and movement in a city intersection can be completely overwhelming.
So the action is a flight response, not recklessness.
Exactly. They might react by freezing or spinning or darting into traffic just to escape that sensory overload. A reaction that looks bizarre to a driver, but is a profound coping mechanism for the pedestrian.
And we see this in other conditions.
We do. In conditions like ADHD, where high impulsivity and inattention mean the individual might move before thinking or fail to register the speed and distance of an oncoming car.
Right.
And neurological issues like Parkinson's disease can lead to freezing episodes or shuffling gaits that make crossing roads hazardous, while seizures can cause sudden disorientation mid-crossing.
And then if we put aside chronic conditions for a moment, we have the immediate situational factors that can turn a rational person erratic.
Of course. Substance use, alcohol, and drugs is a massive contributor. That much is obvious. But what's often overlooked are prescription medications.
Oh, that's a good point.
Many common drugs can cause side effects like severe dizziness, vertigo, or drowsiness. This can make a pedestrian stumble or drift into traffic, even if they're otherwise sober and cognitively intact.
So a driver witnessing erratic behavior is often encountering an undiagnosed medical event or a situational crisis. That is a massive responsibility to suddenly have to shoulder.
It is. High emotional distress, like someone having a personal crisis or an acute panic attack, can lead to total disassociation from the environment. And you couple that with environmental factors. Unfamiliar roads, construction, genuinely poor visibility, and the potential for bizarre, unsafe movement just spikes drastically.
So let's turn to the practical application. For the person behind the wheel, how do you handle this kind of high-stakes situation where logic has basically left the equation? Standard defensive driving advice seems inadequate here.
It is inadequate. The priority has to shift from expecting compliance to managing maximum unpredictability.
Okay.
The key defensive technique isn't just reducing speed, it's creating an extreme safety buffer. If you encounter erratic behavior, someone walking in circles, stopping abruptly, or actively backtracking, you have to reduce your speed to the point where you can stop completely, regardless of the flow of traffic behind you.
Yeah, what about specialized passing techniques? Especially if the person is actively obstructing a lane.
If the behavior is continuous obstruction, you have to use your lane positioning to give them the widest possible berth. The sources suggest utilizing the adjacent lane if it's safe and legal to pass, even if the person is only slightly in your lane.
Don't assume they'll move.
Never assume they will move. If you can't safely pass, you stop and wait, maintaining a safe distance that prevents any sudden physical contact with your vehicle.
Communication is vital, but as we said, the horn can backfire.
Yeah.
How do you communicate your presence without escalating their distress?
You make gradual speed adjustments. Use your signal well in advance to give clear, non-threatening cues of your intentions.
Okay.
Attempting to make eye contact is crucial, but only if the action is brief and doesn't cause you to take your eyes off the person's movement for too long.
And the horn.
If you use the horn, it has to be a short, low-level tap, a gentle alert, not a blare. Use it only if you need to signal your immediate proximity. A sudden blast can easily convert disorientation into panic or even an aggressive response.
This raises an important question. How can pedestrians reduce the likelihood of themselves falling into these behavioral patterns, especially if they have an underlying medical issue?
For pedestrians, the advice is to act deliberately and purposefully. Avoid multitasking and maintain focus. If you feel overwhelmed or disoriented, the first safety measure is to just stop moving. Step off the road and take a moment to collect yourself or call for help.
And for those who are managing chronic conditions?
They need to be keenly aware of their situational vulnerability. If you know you suffered from a TBI that affects impulse control, or you're taking medication that causes drowsiness, you should probably avoid walking in complex or high-traffic areas during peak times, or maybe use assisted transport.
It's about proactive planning.
Absolutely. Always use designated crosswalks, and in low-light conditions, reflective gear should be non-negotiable. And most crucially, proactive management of emotional or psychological stress is a fundamental safety practice for both the individual and the community.
Let's expand this out now to the community and legal structures. What should you, the listener, do if you witness someone displaying this kind of bizarre behavior?
First and foremost, assess the immediate risk to that person. Is there imminent danger of them walking into high-speed traffic?
Right.
But your personal safety is paramount, so avoid confrontation at all costs. An individual who is hallucinating or highly manic might react violently or unpredictably if they're directly challenged.
So de-escalation over confrontation, what's the protocol then?
Alert the appropriate authorities immediately. Call emergency services if there's an immediate medical emergency or a high risk of fatal injury. Call law enforcement for severe obstruction or behavior that indicates a deep crisis.
And what if it seems safe to approach?
If it is safe, and that means you can approach from a distance without entering the road and the person doesn't seem agitated, you can calmly offer to guide them to a safe sidewalk or a bench.
How would you do that?
Just by asking simple, non-confrontational questions like, "Are you okay? Can I help you find the sidewalk?"
And what about the urge, which is so strong today, to record the event?
The source material offers a very strong cautionary note here. Be extremely cautious about recording. Filming or photographing someone in distress can easily be interpreted as mocking or challenging them.
Which can profoundly aggravate an already sensitive and volatile situation.
Exactly. Only record if it's necessary for an official report, and it's absolutely safe for you to do so.
Now, moving to the legal framework, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what are the legal ramifications for the individual themselves?
They can be significant and varied. Charges can range from minor infractions like disorderly conduct or public intoxication to severe charges like reckless endangerment if property damage or injury occurs.
And there's civil liability too.
Yes, if the bizarre behavior leads to an accident, the individual can face serious civil liabilities for damages to vehicles or medical costs for other involved parties, even if they were the one who got injured.
And then there's the most sensitive area. The mental health crisis response.
Right. That's where the state can intervene under mental health laws. If the behavior indicates the person is a danger to themselves or others because of a severe crisis, legal authorities might detain the individual for an involuntary psychiatric evaluation.
The nuances of involuntary commitment.
They differ widely by jurisdiction, but it's a necessary legal mechanism to prioritize safety and ensure the individual receives mandatory care, even if it overrides their immediate personal autonomy.
Which means community solutions have to be integrated. You can't just enforce. You have to treat the root cause.
Absolutely. This means increasing access to quality mental health and substance use services, but the environment matters too. Simple changes. better street lighting, maintaining clear, unobstructed sidewalks, and implementing traffic calming measures like speed bumps. They reduce vehicle speeds and just give everyone more time to react when the unpredictable happens.
Finally, let's look at how technology is adapting to these profound human variables. It's trying to detect and predict the unpredictable.
It is, and technology is moving rapidly into intelligent detection and adaptive control. Advanced video analytics and smart sensors, often embedded in existing traffic infrastructure, are now being trained to recognize patterns of abnormal movement.
Like what?
Like extended hesitation, stumbling, or those backtracking loops we talked about. These patterns can then trigger automated alerts for first responders before a collision even occurs.
And how are those intelligent traffic systems responding? You mentioned adaptive control.
Right, so adaptive control is a sophisticated system where traffic lights don't just run on a fixed timer. Instead, they use sensor input from video or loop detectors to dynamically adjust light timing.
Okay, so if the system detects something odd,
If the system detects a pedestrian exhibiting erratic movement, say a slow crossing or repeated stopping, the traffic light can automatically extend the walk phase or delay the vehicle signal change.
so it's effectively giving that unpredictable person more time to clear the roadway safely.
Exactly. Rather than leaving them stranded when the light turns green, the infrastructure is literally learning to be patient.
That's incredible. And for the human responders?
For responders dealing with these highly sensitive and dangerous encounters, virtual reality, VR, is now being used extensively.
What for training?
For training. It simulates real-life scenarios encountering an aggressive, delusional, or catatonic individual in the middle of a street, allowing personnel to practice de-escalation techniques and medical protocols safely, which improves both their efficacy and their empathy. So we've covered a wide spectrum today. We've recognized that bizarre pedestrian behavior is rarely an act of simple folly, but is often a symptom of profound underlying distress, whether it's TBI, a psychiatric crisis, or just situational overwhelm.
Yeah.
And effective management requires a dual approach. High vigilance and specialized driving techniques for motorists, combined with comprehensive community support and technological adaptation.
Okay, let's leave you with this final complex thought to mull over. When emergency responders deal with bizarre pedestrian behavior, they have to prioritize two seemingly conflicting goals: immediate public road safety and providing appropriate medical and psychological care to the individual in crisis.
A very difficult balance.
It is. So given that the legal implications can range from a simple fine to involuntary commitment under severe mental health crisis laws, how should communities ensure that the enforcement of road safety laws doesn't become the primary barrier preventing the necessary and sometimes mandatory mental health support the person so desperately needs? It's a fundamental balance we all need to consider next time we navigate the unexpected.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.